Okay, so I've been given permission from the House to sort of have a bit more general and expansive topic to start the day, to set some themes about the online world and what happens when the human brain confronts online reality, websites and web pages, online retail, online marketing. And so I'm going to talk about some general themes about what is unique about the online experience, how neuromarketing can help optimize the online experience. And I'm going to conclude with what I call 5 challenges, which I think are 5 ways in which neuromarketing can make a fundamental impact on the value and the success and effectiveness of online retail and online marketing. So I have 3 basic topics. So the first is what is unique about going online, when the human brain goes online. Secondly is a rather optimistic contention, which is how can neuromarketing help produce the perfect website. And third is 5 challenges for online retail and marketing that I believe neuromarketing techniques that we have, tools that we have, can really help solve in a way that traditional market research cannot. What makes the online experience unique? Well, Marshall McLuhan decades ago said that the medium is the message. And just as TV was a unique medium that people took many, many years to understand how it was interacting with us, which of course is interacting with our brains. Similarly, the online world, we're still learning about what is going on when the human brain goes online. And the medium very much determines the message, and this is just another way of saying what was said many times yesterday. The context is absolutely fundamental to communication. So basically, I'm sure there's many, many more attributes in the online world that are unique, but I focused on 3 and compared them here with traditional media. The first one is the traditional media is passive one-way communication. You sit down in front of your TV, and I think someone noted yesterday that this may be changing with younger generations who are engaging in an interactive multi-screen experience every time they turn on their TV. But overall, it's designed when people create advertising and marketing to be passive, for assuming a passive receiver of their knowledge and one-way communication. The internet, on the other hand, is active. When you go online, you're engaged in activity, and it's interactive. The second big difference is that in traditional media, the media directs you. The purpose of the media is to establish a goal for you to follow. In the online world, you are driving, your goals are driving the media. So you have all of these options, you have all of these working paths that you can take at any point through the hyperlink structure of the internet. And so it's goal directed. You're directing your experience, as opposed to the older media where the experience is directing you. And finally, of course, is the issue of the merging of marketing and selling in the online environment. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. The thing that online is most like is the old door-to-door salesman at the end of the 19th or early 20th century. Like the Fuller Brush man that goes door to door, the internet is right there. They are ready to tell you about their products, what's good about them. They are ready to sell them to you. They got their bag, open it up, here's your brush. And it's actually a throwback to an earlier interactive era. In the whole era of the passive receiver of information in marketing has kind of been bypassed. So I think those are 3 important differences and 3 things that make the online world unique. Now, a bit of an aside, these create challenges, I think, and I made the contention that neuromarketing has not had as much success or even as much experience in the online world as we've had in traditional media. And I think there's some reasons for that, and they relate directly to these attributes of the online world. The active interactive media means that it's very hard to make individual experiences constant. So if I just show you a web page, one of you might have one goal in mind while you're looking at that page, and you might have a different goal in mind. And so your experiences are going to be different. Your brain is going to be responding to those different things. So as you know, a big aspect of what we do involves, in order to dampen down the signals that we're not interested in the brain, we take samples and we average them together and we try to make the signals that are not relevant to the stimulus we're interested in to average out to zero so that the signals we are interested in stand out. If everybody's doing different things, it's very hard to do that. Secondly, the fact that people are goal-directed means that you have to set goals for people. You were discussing yesterday doing your pricing study, how you have to set up a clear set of goals so that all of your subjects are doing the same thing, essentially. And that's a fundamental problem, and that's a challenge of experimental design and a challenge of control, which is obviously important. And finally, the merging of marketing and buying, well, it just combines all the problems together, right? So we need to understand what's going on in people's brains, we need to know the cognitive processes, we also need to carry that forward into choice and action. So we really need to combine all the way from the initial responses in the brain to the decisions and the actions that people take. All right, designing the perfect website. So this basic idea here is that, and I have to say that I was struck listening to Phil Farden's presentation yesterday. We really are talking about a lot of the same things. And so you see a lot of similarities between his presentation and mine, which I think is interesting. We didn't include on our presentations, but I think the fact that a lot of these ideas are converging so that many people are coming to the same kinds of conclusions, I think is something to be optimistic about. My idea is basically a perfect website must optimize all three ways that our brains interact with web pages. The first is, as I've said, top-down goal pursuit, understanding what goals people are pursuing and optimizing the site for those goals. Secondly, is what we call bottom-up visual saliency, which is the way in which, as a visual stimulus, the web page guides the visitor in various directions based upon initial automatic visual saliency, which I'll talk a bit more about. And the third is the issue of non-conscious peripheral stimuli, non-conscious processing of the periphery. We know a lot about how the periphery can influence people that are looking at the center that are missed by traditional techniques. And so to understand that, I think, is a piece of the puzzle for understanding what's smooth about the online world. So, Phil stole my thunder on this picture as well, but I think I have a better version of the painting in question, The Unexpected Visitor. And this is Jarvis, 1967, a very famous study where he asked people to look at, he gave people different goals. Look at this picture. Free examination is just looking to stare at the picture. And they're all over the place. Estimate the material circumstances of the family. And they look in different areas. Give the ages of the people. Surmise what the family had been doing before the arrival of the unexpected visitor. Each of these questions prompted a different set of goals in the mind of the viewer and produced these radically different gaze patterns. This is a bottom-up visual saliency map of the Macy's webpage that I showed a couple of slides ago. This was automatically produced. No humans were harmed in making of this heat map. This is based algorithmically upon what we know about what people, what our eyes are drawn to automatically before we even begin to interpret what's going on. And as you can see, it's not necessarily logical. A lot of interest in elbows And that's because of the angles and contrasts that exist here. But this is the way the brain kind of orients and creates a map, which then, when your conscious goals kind of kick in, you use the map to pursue those conscious goals. We'll talk a little bit about how that works later on. Here are some of the aspects of a visual scene that naturally draw automatic bottom-up attention or visual salience. Brightness, colors, borders, distinct borders. We have to understand edges. Edges are very important to vision because that's how we figure out one thing or another. Type groupings of visual objects draw our attention. Overlapping items, because if items are overlapping, you have some interpretation to do to figure out where one begins and the other ends. A movement around the edges, I'll talk a little bit more about this, is very critical. It's very evolutionarily hardwired to be attending to vision, movement around the edges. And then faces and locations where faces are working. This is not strictly visual saliency, but it is an automatic process that occurs very quickly, sort of right in the flow, right after this initial set of kind of mappings occur. What we found is that this is actually very predictive of a lot of behaviors. So I have a couple of videos here I want to show you quickly. Here's an ad, it's very popular.
Hello, ladies. How are you? Fantastic. Does your man look like me? No. Can he smell like me? Yes. Should he use Old Spice body wash? I don't know. Do you like the smell of adventure? Do you want a man who smells like he can bake you a gourmet cake in the dream kitchen he built you with his own hands? Of course you do. Swan dive into the best night of your life. So, ladies, should your man smell like an Old Spice man?
This ad, as you might suspect, went viral very quickly. It spawned a whole series of related ads. Old Spice is a very, very traditional fragrance for men in the United States. And basically what most people say is Old Spice smells like my grandpa. So they wanted to change that, and they wanted to change it radically, and this is the ad that they used. So here's an example of the visual saliency of where the eye goes, and they're very complex, very fast moving ad. Again, this is algorithmically produced. There's no sound, it's visual. So we see a lot of focus on the product, a lot of focus on his armpits. Vision splits, picks up the cake, picks up the saw, edges, and the movement and the flow. So this gives you a sense of how the visual system is oriented to something like this. So you can use this to understand how these kinds of stimuli are being processed at the early automatic level. The next aspect is this non-conscious processing of peripheral stimuli. And I think we have a real positive contribution to make here. So the standard view with regard to eye tracking is this idea of random blindness. You've probably seen pictures like this 1,000 times. So here's the eye tracking. This is where the people were looking. Nobody's looking here. Nobody's looking up there. Nobody's looking on the side. And everybody goes, oh my God, what am I paying for? What am I buying with advertising on the web? Well, we know from the perspective that we bring to advertising research that just because people don't seem to be looking directly at it doesn't mean it's not having an influence. So eye tracking only records the center of our visual gaze, or our foveal vision. It does not record our peripheral gaze, which is parafoveal. I think Phil did a great demonstration of this, the fact that the periphery is actually very blurry because our eyes are only able to focus in a small radius. And in order to compensate for that, our eyes jump around a whole lot. So when you look at eye tracking, you see the saccades, which are the jumps rapid chunks, which is the way that the eye can take in a large field. And there may not be fixations, so the eye tracking heat maps are recorded fixations. The sapods are much faster movements. But we do know that objects on the periphery are observed below conscious awareness, and they can have a significant effect on experience and behavior. So, taking those basic ideas, here are 5 things that I think that neuromarketing could contribute to online retail and marketing experience to improve and optimize those experiences for consumers and, of course, for the retailers and the marketers themselves. Number 1 is, we're going back to this idea of interactivity. What is the sweet spot between interactive and not so interactive? Interactivity and control. This is an article from, I think, 2009. And as you can see, they got very complicated about interactivity. All these variables. How are you high involvement, low involvement? Do you actually use the interactivity, or do you just kind of see it there? Does it inhibit your experience, or does it facilitate it? Are you an experienced web user, or are you not? And does it invoke central or peripheral processing? And then what kind of effect that has on client attitudes. It's a pretty complex model. But the key thing is that interactivity is not, just more is not necessarily better. As you can see, there can be too much interactivity. And our brains reject this as much as you will reject the boredom of so it's like kind of a Goldilocks effect, right? You don't want the porridge to be too hot, you don't want it too cold, you want it to be just right. One approach that I found useful for trying to understand this question of the interactivity sweet spot is that you have 2 fundamental attributes of stimuli in our environment, which is novelty and familiarity. Novelty and familiarity are kind of like twins joined at the hip. And we're drawn to novelty, but we tend to distrust it. It creates vigilance. When something is new, it's potentially dangerous. So our minds, brains are kind of on a vigilant alert. Familiarity, on the other hand, is our brains love familiarity. It's comforting. We tend to associate all kinds of great attributes with familiarity. Things that are more familiar, we like them more. We think they're more true. We think they're more beautiful. We think they're less risky. And you can see a continuum from, very, very novel, which tends to produce an avoidance response, to a kind of an optimal novelty, which I call here simply surprising on this interactivity scale. And then we kind of novelty fades and familiarity rises, and there's an optimal point of familiarity. And if it gets too familiar, then it just gets boring, and we just step away from it. So in the web world, something like Pinterest, I think, is a good example of simply surprising. So this is a brand new way of creating content on the web for the user. But it's very simple and easy to understand. Even though it's news, people can catch on really quickly. So it kind of fits into that simply surprising mode. And of course, it's comfortably simple is something like our old friend Apple. You go to the Apple website, there's lots of white space, yellow space in this case. And it's the simplest kind of interface you could imagine. And it always, although they're always advertising new products, it's always the same. So they leverage that familiarity and the associations with the brand that go with that. Second problem that I think we can really do a lot on is to help retailers really exploit this visual saliency that I've been talking about in order to create more intuitive and more fluent web pages. This is a little example of persuasive design, which is a topic that is becoming rather hot in the online world. And again, with